even when we are not changing our jobs. Isn't that something? And the pandemic has literally pulled the future forward, uh, and accelerated this pace of change and transformation that we have been seeing. And in fact, not just that, what struck me last week, I was attending a webinar with my 14-year-old son on higher education, and one of the educators on the webinar said that as a parent, are you preparing your child for one career for their entire life, or are you going to prepare them for a lifetime of careers? And I can see some nodding faces. I know like as parents, some parents in the room get that. We're thinking about it obviously as professionals, but when we actually think about it this way, it really hits us home that we're talking about the future. The future is very much here. We have seen an accelerated amount of disruption and change. And for organizations, these transformations could be, we could break it up in three transformations. So there is definitely the workplace transformation, which is where, and we were just talking as a panel that this workplace transformation is where top talent is no longer location constrained, where it is really about where people are moving and flexibility. Then there is the workforce transformation, which is where organizations are focusing on diversity and inclusion, on internal mobility, and really rethinking how their workforce looks like. And then, of course, the digital transformation, which we've been talking about, where there is definitely a huge demand for skilling, upskilling, getting the right talent. And the confluence of all these three transformations is what is being caused as the great reshuffle, which is where people think about why I work, where I work, and how I work. So when we talk about as an individual, if we talk about why I work, it's really about what is the purpose-driven work I'm getting to do. How I work, is there flexibility? Where I work, what is the kind of employee culture? Is the organization investing in helping me learn and grow? Is really looking at career pathing in the right way? And just to give you some numbers, more than 1 billion jobs, or almost, let's say, one third of jobs worldwide, are likely to be transformed by technology in the next decade. And as per LinkedIn's data, this disruption is already very well underway. So it's not just about the next decade. Our data has shown that skill sets for jobs have changed around 25% just between 2015 till now. And by 2027, this number will double. And then just let's look at what is the dollar value of all of this. So as per a report by Conferry, by 2030, the current skills shortages will result in a $4.2 trillion of unrealized revenue and 47 million shortfall of workers. So you see, everyone's feeling the pain right now, and addressing the skills challenges is definitely not just for everyone, all HR and L&D professionals in the room, but even CEOs are really thinking about this and are worried, because as per the latest Deloitte Fortune CEO survey, 73% of CEOs identified skill shortages as a major disruptor to their business and business strategy, and what could come in their way of meeting their goals. So upkeeping skills has thus emerged as not just very important, but very key to staying relevant to your current role, landing a new job. Skills are front and center of the way hiring managers are looking at bringing in new talent. And in this all sense, we can easily say that skills are the new currency of the new labor market. So I'm excited to be here with three industry leaders, and I'm going to spend the next 30, 40 minutes to actually uncover a little more with all of them around what is our role as leaders to solve this problem. How do we anticipate future skills? How do we measure what we need to look for? What are the skills that are required? How do we do this? So let's go into that. But before I get into all these questions, I know, thanks to the introduction, I still feel the introduction is incomplete. I would love to, hear a little more from our panelists to understand what's not on your LinkedIn profile. So let's hear something fun. So let's get to know the leader and the person. So Vishpala, do you want to go first and tell us what's not on your LinkedIn profile? Anything fun?
Yeah, sure. Sushi, thank you so much for the introduction. And I don't really think about it. This was a dinner table conversation yesterday, and I was talking to my two kids. I have someone in class 10 and class 7, two boys, and they were like, "How come you don't have a pronoun on your LinkedIn profile?" And that was the feedback from my younger son actually. I'm like, I'll think about it. So there you go. My pronoun's not updated, and this is for all the people who are truly imbibing DNI, and I think we're all on a journey. It talks about learning, and I'll give you some more examples. But that's something I need to do.
Excellent, Vishpala.
Great.
Ajay?
So as far as I'm concerned, I think prior to getting into HR, I was more on a production shop floor, and I think that was an opportunity which I experienced, where I got to sit on both sides of the table. So I have been interacting with the unions as well as representing the officers association. So that experience probably gave me an understanding which was much broader, rather than just going across and thinking about it from a leadership point of view.
Thank you. I don't know, I couldn't find anything fun fun element out there. But one thing which is missing from my profile is surely I have skipped my manufacturing experience. Actually, I started my journey with manufacturing, and last 23 years have been in, majority of my experience has been services. So that's one piece which is missing. Another piece which is missing is that since it's work in progress, I guess not to put there, but I'm pursuing my PhD in economics, which is very different from HR, So maybe a cross-functional, skill building. But that's very interesting piece, economics, doing PhD in developmental economics, and then, talking about HR. You can imagine how different they can be. So, Ruchi, that's what it is,
Wonderful. And it does.
And Ruchi, in fact, I would ask you also. You should also say what's missing from your LinkedIn profile. Please,
All
yeah,
right.
please.
Thank you. Yes, firstly, I am impressed with whatever each of you have said. It's not on your LinkedIn profiles yet, whatever you've shared, but definitely can go on your LinkedIn profile. Let me think of something then which can go on my LinkedIn profile, because I shouldn't share then what's not, what shouldn't go. Anyway, so between my first and second job, I took a 3-month break and I joined a theater group. I did a lot of plays, English theater, and maybe I think now since we're talking about skills, I can probably say that the skills I was able to kind of learn there, and still it's work in progress, is like they say, how do you prepare for uncertainty? Because you never know what's going to happen live on stage, and I hope that we are able to kind of do a good job right now. And yes, be prepared for uncertainty as well as look at the show must go on. So with that, let's kind of continue, and let's add, before we get into very specific skill related questions, let's actually take a step back to understand more from a macro perspective, because there's just so much that's happening. And Avdish, maybe I'll start with you. I mean, and you spoke about, the good thing is that you are an economist and also doing a PhD. What we've been reading, that economists have been anticipating with the US recession that we are staring at, there could be a spillover effect on the Indian economy, where there could be a growth slowdown, but not necessarily that we are degrowing, but more in terms of how does that impact your business, and how do you think about really like how is it going to impact your business? How are you thinking about skills within your organization, within your industry? Any view from how does macro impact?
Yeah, no, I think, to start the, conversation, that's a very good question to answer. I'm not a economics expert as of now, work in progress, but I'll make some observations, See, first of all, rest assured that India is not getting into recession, even if US and continental Europe, primarily, or maybe include all of Europe, I would say, even if they are going to get into recession by early 2023, that's what people are expecting. With all the, the Fed action, it is only a matter of time when interest rates are going to have impact on the growth, primarily led by US, and then people are obviously talking about the entire European Union getting into some kind of a recession. early 2023 or late 2022 as this entire, the interest rate scenario plays out, But I can assure the audience that we are going to be far, far away from that kind of a situation. What may happen in India is that we may see some kind of tapering in growth because our economy is also highly integrated with the world economy. You can't completely decouple what happens in the Western world, especially if you look at outsourcing and all that. Decoupling is not possible. It is highly integrated, So that's one thing I wanted to say. Second is that coming to your question, Ruchi, in terms of impact, I think there are two scenarios which are going to play out. One is going to be, is it going to be a shallow recession or is going to be a deep rooted recession? If it's going to be a shallow recession, at least I can speak about my company, which is the financial research and analytics company. Some of you would know we are offshoot from Moody's Corporation and the rating agency, and this company happens to be in financial services. See, as far as we are concerned, if it's going to be a mild, shallow recession, I think it's positive. Why it is positive? Because when you try to do some kind of a cost reorganization, India fits in very well as a preferred outsourcing destination. And some of us who are in outsourcing industry, providing research, analytics, IT and technology, that side is going to gain momentum if it is a shallow recession. If it is a deep recession, then obviously everything is going to get impacted, and there are chances that jobs are going to be not available, and some kind of layoffs and all are possible. Personally speaking, my personal view is that I'm not looking at a scenario of a deep recession. So I remain very optimistic. My final comment, my final worry on this entire topic is that the demand seems to be very, very robust. We are struggling with the supply side issue, and we are going to speak about skill shortage and skill building and all. But trust me, guys, I'm telling you, at least in 2023 or 2024 or beyond, I think it's a supply side which is going to be worrisome rather than the demand side, even if some sort of recession is going to kicking in 2022 or 2023.
Thanks, Avdish. On that positive note, it's good to hear the optimism, and I think you're right. In fact, Vishpala, let me ask you. And Philips is such a loved, renowned brand, and your focus as a large organization, really, when you talk about establishing yourself and being known for in the health tech as a health tech company. And with all of these macro factors, how are you seeing this? And if you can, because there's a lot of transition that's happening within your organization as well with this. So could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, sure. I think from my perspective, we're living in very interesting times, Ruchi. I feel like it's two sides of the coin, right? So there's one side of the coin where there's too much of macro factors that will impact the HR function, right? Especially depends on your nature of operations, the industry you work in, because like Avdesh said, like supply chain is a big deal for companies that are in manufacturing, which includes sort of Philips, right? Our dependence on, say, parts and chips coming in from China is a big issue. Today, the war, right? We're a Dutch multinational. The war has large implications, both from a talent standpoint, from a consumer sentiment standpoint. So these are factors that we can't ignore, including inflation, as he said, in Europe and the US. So I feel like HR as a function will have to look at mitigating this. At least that's my perspective. So for example, if you're looking at continuous improvement, how can you eliminate waste, right? It's small things like that Philips has a lot of focus on lean and for every function, including HR, right? So those are ways of how you can help to that aspect, even from a capability standpoint as well as a function priority standpoint. The other side of the coin is that I can't think in the last 15, 20 years where both are playing at hand. For any company that's operating in the Indian subcontinent, right? There is a war for talent. Like, I don't know if there's anyone here in the room that's associated in the HR function that's not grappling with maybe attrition steeping up, offer rates kind of going down. So that is a reality as well, to say, how do you skill? How do you really hire ahead of the curve? And this is true not for every skill set, but for those future skill sets, especially in the technology arena, right? So it's an interesting play where both are probably competing. You need to do the first part, which is being more cost conscious, probably eliminating waste, focusing on process. But then how do you build those skills and capabilities for the future, which is where HR can play a huge role.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. In fact, HR is definitely in the driver's seat, really kind of being able to shape that strategy for the organization, not just for today, but for the future in terms of how it looks like. And since we're on that topic, like to hear from you, Ajay. I mean, you're from a industry which is very much in focus, especially when we talk about the surging gas prices in the US and all the geopolitical situation that we see. There's this huge focus on green hydrogen, and also countries are today scrambling and focusing on what does energy security look like, because earlier, of course, if it was not just climate change that there was focus on renewable energy or green hydrogen, but right now with this geopolitical situation, it's just accelerated. So how do you see it from your perspective for your industry as well as for your organization, Ajay?
Sure. So I think I would agree with both of my panel members. So where it was demand is robust, and demand can't be more robust as far as we as an organization are concerned. And if I just quote a few numbers, I think in COP26, when everybody signed up for a net zero by 2070, I think that's a global agenda. And India is definitely there on the roadmap. To add further, when we look at the renewable energy segment in India, today we might be generating about 150 gigawatt. That's a total supply that we do. Whereas by 2030, it needs to go to 3 times. So it is 500 gigawatt plus. So if that is the type of demand which is getting generated, obviously it's the execution ability of the organizations which is going to be supporting them to grab the pie, right? Now, challenges which are coming along with that is, and I'm just restricting my thoughts to India at this point in time. So, over the last decade, probably India started more on the wind side, later on added the solar, now recognizing hydro as a part of renewable space, and then continuing to look at the supply chain challenges. So obviously, we were not into manufacturing. So when we look at limited manufacturing on the solar side, limited manufacturing on the wind side, I think quite a few organizations are trying to figure it out. On top of that is the green hydrogen. So green hydrogen is only one color. I think in the last 1 year, the number of colors of hydrogen that I have understood are many more. So I don't think as a science student, I ever recognize that hydrogen will also have colors, but there are dozens of colors which the world is trying to track today. So from that point of view, things are shaping up. So now, when we look at this type of a context for the organization, I'm sure 85% of the technology is yet to be figured out. So if we talk about 2070, 85% of the technology is yet to be figured out. And in the next 7 years, when we are approaching towards 2030, I'm sure more than 50% of things are not known today. So that is the context in which we are talking about. So when we look at skills and competencies, and those will be things which will follow through, I'm sure if technology itself is not known, then skills are definitely not available. So that's the context as far as our industry is concerned.
Thanks, Ajay. And if you, I mean, to add to what you said, if we don't even know the technology and the skills, very clearly acquiring, developing, and then retaining this talent and these skills is all put together definitely one of the biggest I would say challenges that HR professionals today are facing and all leaders are facing. And in fact, all the more if you think about right now with the way job growth and wages are surging, I think this candidate market that we are seeing is something that I'm sure we've never in our career seen before, right? And in fact, if we were to kind of build on this and think about, it's almost like the three problems. If we break that down, it is one is of course the hiring problem, which is what we're saying in terms of, and I'm just going to quote some LinkedIn data that we dug into. So when we talk about the hiring problem, LinkedIn data has shown that there's been a 60% increase in job posts over the past year, and even with all this job activity, hirers are, of course, still finding it challenging to be able to get people with the right skills. And then of course, there's the retention problem, right? Where we're seeing retention as such a big challenge. And with attrition rising and with employees seeking opportunities that allow them to build their skills, our data has shown that there's been a 69% increase in job transitions, coupled with the average tenure that's declining. So in fact, in across APAC, what we've seen is that 60% more workers have changed their jobs between August and October 21 versus in the same period in 2019. And this is all because a large part of their expectations are also changing. Like I said, where I work, why I work, and how I work. And they're willing to walk away if companies are not going to invest in them. So we're also seeing that employees are uh, 10 times more likely to start looking for a new job if they feel that their skills are not being put into use. So it's also about, when we talk about retention, the current skills, how are they being used, how are they being up leveled. And then of course the third problem is the skills gap problem, which we've been definitely talking about with the rapidly changing skills. We've seen that most in demand jobs did not the in demand jobs that we rank on LinkedIn on a platform, most of them today did not even exist 10 years ago, right? And that's exactly what you're saying, that 70% of the technology is still being worked on to discover, and then that's what's going to happen. In fact, let me just ask you itself, Ajay, and then Vishpal, I would want to hear your perspective. When we look at that, the average tenure is declining from 5.4 to 2.9 years. How can HR leaders really build their skills with the talent skills first strategy? How can you actually embark on a skills first strategy? And why I say that from a skills first perspective is also, we have normally been focusing on hiring not through skills but via pedigree, with degrees and from where they come from, rather than what skills. And I'm not saying that totally needs to be discounted, but how do we kind of think about and also putting our employee value proposition at the center with learning and development at the core? So where do you think they should start?
Just to add one number to what you spoke about, which was on the attrition front. So if you look at US alone, during the course of this year, there have been an increase in about 269% as far as hiring in the renewable space is concerned, versus a 19% in the oil and gas. So just to put the contrast, so that is where the numbers are shaping up. So when we look at that type of a population being available to be hired, that itself is a big question mark, because it's not the skill that the individual is going to get to the table. It's more of learnability that the individual needs to bring to the table. And I think that is something which is extremely critical in terms of managing this demand. Second is more around maybe adjacencies, because end of the day, if people are not getting an opportunity in oil and gas, probably they have been exposed to a process industry, and therefore they can fit into a hydrogen requirement. Migrations will be relatively easier. So identifying those adjacencies and then trying to build their learning maps around it. And third, when we are looking at retention of skills and how do we go across and continuously build that, I think the way we are trying to figure out it is more of working with academia, because that is where the technology and all those joint development spaces are coming up, trying to get people through rotations into those. And those are the individuals who get groomed more from a training individual's perspective within the organization. Now, the second part of your question, where how do we go across and create that urge amongst people? And I think that is something which you can influence to a certain extent, and that is more of a demonstrated way, walk the talk. And I think that is something which is critical. As I said, the number of colors of hydrogen, I wasn't aware till about a year back. So I think people will have to pick up those things, and those things need to be demonstrated by leaders themselves undergoing that. So I think for us, a top-down approach is extremely critical. That is where we are focusing significantly, because that is one good way of putting things. Second one is more on rotations, which are based on, and that is something which is not a rocket science, because I think IT services industry tried to do it towards the end of 97 to 2002. I think that was one wave, and then again 2007 to 2010, where these pieces were put in place, where a credit-based movement across jobs. So one needs to earn a certain set of credits before, learning credits, before the person can be moved around. That automatically puts the focus back on the individuals, that career growth is directly going to be related to the number of credits that they earn. So I think those are few things that we are trying to work with.
That's great, Ajay. In fact, I mean, I think this so much, and in the 3 points that you shared, clearly around academia. How do you influence there? How do you help them build those skills? Their role of leaders, so important in terms of how they role model, how they demonstrate that. And I really liked the last point you made on rotations. That is exactly what we've been saying around how do you use their skills and how do you help them learn and apply them through these credits. So that's great. Vishpala, what
Yeah,
would you
so
want to add?
just to add, right, Ruchi, I think talent and learning have to be integrated. I think that's a big key takeaway. Like I have seen lots of organizations who are integrating the function even within HR, right?
Mm.
And for example, we have like how you have HR business partners, we have talent and learning partners, right? Who are then looking at it consolidated. Because if not, what happens is you're looking at the learning strategy and the talent strategy in isolation. Because then what happens is that you focus on skills development, but then does it really translate to a move, right? So for instance, when we spoke about mobility, like one of the interesting data that we've seen is that in this year itself, like, and we're tracking it to say that the percentage of employees who've seen some talent movement, it doesn't have to be only promotions, right? It can be a lateral move. I think like Ajay is saying, learning translating to actually moves demonstrates that the person is upskilling, right? So I think we in HR can probably play a role in driving that number from a visibility to both employees as well as leaders. The other interesting point that you said is when the LinkedIn data showed that the number of job posts have gone up, the skills have changed, but yet if you, I think, zoom in the number of job posts that have gone up, I think it's become like a fishbowl. So it's not like every single job is getting posted. It is that many companies are trying to hire those top 10 skills. So as a result of which there is a demand and supply sort of, I would say, inequity. So one of the things that I think we should do, I am borrowing this from my own sort of managing director. He always says that instead of playing in the battlefield, why don't you change the battleground itself, right? So one such example is more on the manufacturing shop floor, like an interesting experiment that our teams have done is, can we actually go after, socially inclusive economic demographics, pick people from them, train them. So these are first time workers, right, who probably are seeing employment for the first time. It means you're giving them a new skill set, right, from an assembly standpoint. And so we're actively working on that, and I'm not going to get into the product details, but it's working beautifully because it's working into gender diversity stats. 65% of those apprenticeships are actually females, first time workers. So they came into the office with their parents for the first time. So I feel like you can also look at supply in a different lens. So traditionally in India, we've always played in the campus space. Everyone knows that. But we can do more if we unpeel the onion a little bit on what else, right, as you're creating that supply.
That's great, both on the convergence of talent and learning. And I remember, Vishpala, earlier you had mentioned to me around how you, as an organization, have been tracking what internal mobility looks like, and almost like it's there on the dashboard as well. So it's really, I think, that's where it is in terms of when we are putting something around it. How are you seeing? What are the milestones? How it's progressing?
And just one more data point, right? So this is a live conversation. The talent acquisition team is happening, right? We all know we always track referrals, right? We always track like how many internal job posts. But one of the things is we're actually looking at our IJP policies to say, today, if you're in the 25%, which we think is good, can we take it to 35%? Because then you're actively telling, it goes back to the skilling. And that's why I said talent and skills and learning have to come together. So it is about, these are small things, but the minute you start tracking, then you know that your employees are actually moving.
That's true, and even I love that the quote on changing the battleground by itself. Avdish, I'll come to you with the next question, really around when we're talking about with such gaps in skills, especially in skills profiling and mapping, how difficult or easy it is for organizations to identify the skills of the future, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I know Ajay also spoke about that. It's not easy, but still, while we're in that process, what are the
No,
few things?
no, I agree with you. It's not easy at all, And before I make a very company-specific comment, let me make a very quick macro-level comment. Me and Vishpala and some of us have been in HR conferences for decades now, And I can tell you guys that there's not been a single year when people are not talking about skill gap for last 2 decades. I started my career in TCS, year 99, 2000, every year there is a conference happening on skill gap. So we should really, we should really reflect, why is it that we are not able to solve this entire skill gap problem? Only one comment macro level I will make before I get into the company specific thing is, I think our primary and secondary education system does a lot of damage. And that's why, I was joking with one of my friends that if I put out an ad that I'm looking for MBA finance, we are a financial services company, I can tell you something, a simple ad, MBA finance first class or whatever XYZ, I may have to call the police to control the crowd. But at the end of the day, what do you get? Sorry for being a little cynical, but I think it's important sometimes to be a little cynical and critical in terms of the macro level. What you ultimately get is that you will be lucky if you can select 10 people at the end of the day. My appeal to everyone who is looking at macroeconomic, we are not the guys who influence it, the government, the bureaucrats and all. I think that the skill problem for India will get solved permanently only when you structurally overhaul the primary and secondary level education system. So that's one comment I wanted to make. As far as organizations are concerned, very quick comment, bullet point, because I'm looking at the clock there. See, if you want to identify the needs for future L&D professionals here, trust me, I'm telling guys, you need to be close to the customer. It is the customer requirement and the business requirement which drives what you need now and what you need in future. The only difference I would say is this, that sometimes even customers are not aware what technology does to the jobs. They're not aware. So one tip, please be close to the customers, understand the business, because that's where you are going to get direction for what kind of skills are needed, because that's where you get your money from. That's one. Secondly, be on top of the technology disruption. And I think Ruchi spoke about it right in the beginning, that the jobs are getting disrupted and you really don't know within 6 months there is a new job which is coming up. Keep a tab on it. And then once you have done those two things, I think the entire infrastructure that Vishpala is talking about, the internal job rotations, how do you hire for skills, all that can be put together. That's what my point.
Thanks, Avdish. Ajay, if you can build on what Avdish has said, and even in terms of when we are looking at identifying these skills from an L&D perspective in your team, what kind of investments would you typically be looking at to be able to identify or using of technology within your teams? Are there any of those which could be like some practical tips?
So, as I was alluding to earlier, when we are still trying to figure out the technologies and we are trying to work through the jobs, so there is a development of, I would say, job and skill maps, which is happening at two levels. One is right now, right here, what is required. And that is something which we have done over the last 6 to 9 months internally, and that is an activity which has been continuing. Second one is that we have tie-ups with at least half a dozen universities globally, where we are trying to go into the joint development of technology. And that is something which is helping us guide what would be the skill sets that might be required 6 months to 12 months down the line or in the future. So it will operate at these two levels, and that is the way we will have to mobilize things. One is that based on my current requirements, things will continue to be mobilized, and that is something which we can talk about, whichever way we have been running L&OD function over a period of time. But there has to be that migration, and there has to be identification of people who can start getting groomed for the newer jobs which are evolving. So both these tracks will run in parallel. That is what we are trying to solve for.
Wonderful. And I think if I hear what all of you have said, it's almost like picking those signals externally, internally, to really understand what skills are required. And also, it's going to be like they say, a constellation of activities, not just one thing. I do have more questions, but I'm going to pause here and actually open it up for the audience, because we have a few minutes and maybe we can take some questions from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, so I am taking a cue from what Vishpala said, which is, high decline in offer rates going and high attrition rate going up. Also from what Avdesh said, as in the education system, it has a gap between how we are looking at the country from employment perspective and how the people are coming up to the ladder to understand where should they go. So we whenever we talk about such um, situation or such broad topic, how do you think we can move the education system, or how can we onboard them onto such lines where we are guiding them how should it be for the country, and now how, not how should they go and have an factory approach of mass production of people coming out from colleges and universities. So how can we go and bridge the gap?
So Ankita, right? Let me try, because I think what many companies are now doing, right, is that you actually can get into some sort of a tie-up with different institutes to design the curriculum, and this is very common now, right? So that is a easy way of saying that I will help design the curriculum. I will probably come and engage with that the students through the curriculum, and then of course then that will probably help you shape and mold the realities of today versus it being theoretical. Now, large scale organizations have taken it to the next level, right? Where you have lots of academies that are being set up, right? Where then you bring people from the same campuses, but then you're investing maybe 6 months in the classroom before you put them back from a productivity standpoint, where you can again integrate what is relevant to the customer, what is relevant to the organization. But this is obviously at a stage which is more, where people are ready for jobs. I obviously I cannot tackle that at a school or at an education level, because that, I think, like Avdesh said, is more the role of the government and the education system. But I don't know, Avdesh, what do you
No, I'll be making very quick comment. See, trust me, guys, all of you, majority of you are L&D guys, you will realize that if you read a lot of literature in terms of what makes people successful, you will realize that these are very generic skills by and large. Problem solving, cognitive ability, communication skills, and I'm not talking about language skills. You can be a good communicator in any language, by the way. These top three, and critical thinking, if you go and look at the success rate of anybody with these 4, 5, 6 basic skills, the success rate across sectors is very high. You want to get into, you want to be cook, you want to be a designer, you want to be a financial services valuation modeler. These are very critical skills. The problem is that it is not easy for a company like ours within 3 months of that newbie orientation to inculcate these skills, because they take a long time to develop. But what we can do, obviously, as Vishpala said, absolutely right. It's not that you can't do anything and you can say, "Oh, I give up." As an industry, we can't say that. There's a huge demand out there, huge demand. Supply is, constraint like anything. So what do? You do a tie-up with the institutes. You try to inculcate communication skills, problem solving, critical thinking, cognitive ability as much as you can. And I think that's what the industry is doing. And since industry can't solve the problem, we are having this conference again and again on skills gap every year, Because we beyond the point, we can't solve this problem. It has to start from how do you educate, a 3-year-old child in terms of thinking ability, cognitive ability, and it takes years to develop cognitive ability, guys. So
Next,
sorry, we can't solve that problem.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Hetal here. First and
Yes,
foremost,
Hetal.
thanks a lot for an engaging conversation. I got 2 questions. The first one is for Vishpala, where she mentioned about skill and talent go together. But it's also been felt that skill could be a leading or a lagging indicator, because if your core job is what you're doing well and you're feeling crunched, you're feeling that you're not growing enough, the organization comes and build up the skill. So you would want to highlight on that. The second one is from a lead and a lag indicator perspective. Maybe I would probably direct that to Ruchi, because she's aware of the learning landscape. Where are the demand more? Is the organization feeling more to be able to provide a lot of skill platforms, or are the individuals growing up and realizing the need? Because I think the major reason for the great resignation is that people have felt that they are not doing enough, and then they expressed it in form of a resignation. If they had expressed it in terms of going to the organization and picking up a course to pick up, I think they would have said. So, comment to you.
Okay, so we'll take the second question first, and I think it's a great question. Actually, that was one of my last questions which we were going to ask, really around what is the role of the employer as well as the employee. And Hital, it's actually both ways, because yes, where we are today is probably organizations found themselves not completely ready to be able to give all their employees those tools where they feel that yes, they're constantly learning and they're able to apply. But I think we've made great progress, as we're seeing, at least as a platform where we're seeing organizations have really been adapting, focusing on internal mobility by ensuring that the employees are building and the organization is building a learning culture. On the employee, of course, the onus is also on the employee to be able to share their voice, and that's where this comes in. Firstly, what is the feedback mechanism between the employee and the employer? I think that's where we're seeing that that's also got built. But definitely we're seeing that on both sides there is responsibility and accountability, which is changing. I know we're at time, but quickly you want to just give your
Yeah,
last
very-
comment.
Yeah, very, very quickly, because it says 000. We have no time left. But I think from, talent and learning, right? It's a macro and micro. So for example, if the organization is focusing on, like Ruchi said, we want to become a health technology company. So what does that mean? We need people to move away from selling just your product and your equipment to probably selling solutions. So what is the capability? It is solutions. That's broad based, which has to get integrated into your learning curriculums. How does the talent piece kind of interplay? Is that, so as you get into probably talent reviews, right, in terms of what makes you successful, because that's where, as you look at the individual, right, like you will talk about, if not, you go into a talent review many a times and say, hey, this person is great, they can do this role, but what after, right? So if your development plans are synced to that, if your assessment methodologies are synced to that, right, like the skills that and the capabilities that are important, that's where it comes to life. I wish I could go deeper, but there's a lot of power in integrating that. It's tough because you have to keep it simple. If you go to the business leader and say, here is my 5-page document as to why they need to come together, they'll be like, yeah, please leave, right? So the trick is to keep it reasonable, measurable, but yet integrated.
Maybe just to comment on that resignation piece, I don't think people are resigning for getting a different skill set. I think 85 to 90% resignations are not for that reason. There will be one of 10 where there would be a discussion that okay, there's something which is constrained here. So I think we need to see it a bit differently. These are two different sides of the resignation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for being such an engaging audience. And thank you, Avdish, Ajay, Vishpala. It was just such a pleasure to have this conversation with all of you. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.